Hey everybody, this is Cave. I am with Roseville grad from 2008, Nick Pouladian. Nick is an attorney with the Legal Rights Center, and Nick is going to help us out for the next few weeks, few months, understand what's going on in the Derek Chauvin murder case, the murder of George Floyd that took place last summer. Thanks, Nick, for helping us out.
Absolutely, James. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So everybody's talking about the start of the trial tomorrow, March 8th. What actually happens tomorrow?
Yeah, so if everything goes as currently planned, the schedule is that tomorrow is going to be the first day of jury selection. So jury selection is going to be where the attorneys sort of get to interview and talk to the potential jurors. They've answered questionnaires ahead of time. With COVID, that's sort of been the standard now. So jurors try to get as much information remotely ahead of time. The attorneys will look through those to see if there are things they want or don't want or want to follow up on with the potential jurors. And beginning at 9 a.m. tomorrow, they're going to bring jurors in individually and go through the process called voir dire, depending on who you ask. Jury selection beginning tomorrow.
It sounds like that's a long process without COVID. Do you think that with COVID, one at a time, that's going to be even longer?
Yeah, it definitely is going to be longer than typical. I think particularly because of the magnitude of the case, plus the obvious complications of COVID, it is going to be longer. I think the judge has allotted 3 weeks potentially for them to go through that. Typically, you don't interview folks one at a time. Usually everybody's in the room in the panel. There may be folks you talk to individually if there are, something they don't want to share or unique circumstances. So this is really not the typical situation that we're going to be seeing.
So best case scenario, this trial starts in 3 weeks from now?
Yeah, I think the judge ordered that opening statements will start by March 29th. I'm trying to think of if he even said they can only start by March 29th, but yep. 3 weeks for jury selection, but they have to have it wrapped up by then and get ready to go for opening statements on the 29th.
Okay, so there were 4 police officers involved from the videos that we all saw. Do they all go on trial starting in 3 weeks?
No, it's just going to be Derek Chauvin. They initially were scheduled to have them all at the same time. The defendants had motioned to have them separately. The judge denied that and said, nope, we're going to do it all together. The main reason he gave was that there was no indication there were going to be what's called antagonistic defenses. And that would be where, say you and I are on trial for something and we're pointing fingers at each other saying, oh, it wasn't me, it was James. And you're saying, nope, it wasn't me, it was Nick. So they said that wasn't a factor here. So due to COVID, they did split it up. So it's just going to be Derek Chauvin. The other officers are scheduled for out in August to try to accommodate as best they can social distancing.
Okay. So what charges does Derek Chauvin face?
So currently he's facing second-degree unintentional murder. And that is where they're alleging that he caused the death of George Floyd while committing a felony. And to be really clear there, none of the charges currently against him involve the intent to kill George Floyd. They are obviously alleging that he did cause the death of George Floyd, but not intentionally in the way that folks might sort of colloquially think of. So that's the more serious charge. The other charge is currently manslaughter in the second degree. That's saying that he acted culpably negligently and caused the death of George Floyd.
Okay, so there was a court decision this week that might change the charges against Derek Chauvin. Could you explain that? I think that was the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So big decision. So there are really 2 cases here that we're talking about. The first one is obviously the Derek Chauvin trial coming up. Where the third-degree murder charge comes in is with the Mohammed Noor case. So the former officer Noor, who was convicted, I think 3 years ago at this point. He was convicted of third-degree murder. In his case, he did appeal that to the Court of Appeals. And primarily the issue is third-degree murder is a weird charge. Third-degree murder is saying that somebody acted recklessly with a depraved mind, and they did something eminently dangerous to others. So that's a mouthful. Essentially what it's saying is that you caused the death of somebody basically doing something really reckless where anybody in the surrounding area could have been hurt or killed, right? So the typical example we give is if somebody goes to a park and takes a gun and just shoots off randomly into the crowd, right? Another way it's charged out is if folks are selling drugs, say it's drugs laced with fentanyl, somebody buys the drugs and they die. You're charging the drug dealer, the drug creator. They're saying you created this product, could have hurt, could have killed anybody, and it did here. So Mohammed Noor and the law, the way the law currently stands, is the courts interpreted that statute to say primarily that a charge of third-degree murder is not appropriate. It's not, as a matter of law, acceptable when the person's actions were directed specifically and solely at one person, right? And not potentially dangerous to other folks. That's kind of giving it the short issue perspective. So Mohammed Noor appealed and said, hey, you know what? I fired my gun only at the person immediately outside of the car. It wasn't going to hurt anybody else. It wasn't reckless and random, right? The Court of Appeals just recently, I think the decision came out 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at this point, interpreted the third-degree murder statute to say, actually, it can encompass a situation where the defendant, the charged person's actions, only were directed at and only could have affected one person. So with that interpretation of the law, the state of Minnesota in the Derek Chauvin case, where he was originally charged with third-degree murder, but the district court, and when I say the district court, I mean the trial court judge, he dismissed the third-degree charge because at the time, it was very clear in the law that a third-degree murder charge was not appropriate when it was directed at one person. Watching the video, what you see for Officer Chauvin, his actions, the knee on George Floyd's neck, is clearly only on George Floyd's neck, and it's not possible for him to have multiple knees on multiple people at the same time. So the judge dismissed it, saying there's no legal way for this to go forward. It doesn't fit that statute, so it's out. Based on the Court of Appeals decision in the Mohammed Noor case, the state said, whoa, hey, now we can charge him because it is okay, even if his actions were directed at one person. So the trial court judge reheard the motion and said, you know what, folks, I disagree with the Court of Appeals. I think they got it wrong. So because they got it wrong, and because I don't consider their ruling to be authoritative at this time, I'm not going to let you reinstate the third-degree murder charge. The state appealed that decision. So it's kind of like a Russian nesting doll. It's like an appeal within an appeal within an appeal. So the state appealed that to the Court of Appeals and said, hey, judges, Court of Appeals, the district court refused to follow your authority, and we want you to tell him that he's wrong. So the Court of Appeals heard the arguments, and they did send a decision back down to the trial court judge and said, hey, judge, you are wrong. The decision we made is binding on you. You have to follow that decision. Even if you think we got it wrong, you have to follow it. So that's where we left off on Friday. That was the decision that came out, the weekend going into the Derek Chauvin trial.
Right.
So where we're at is the state is likely going to want to reinstate third-degree murder, or at least have that motion heard again. The defense is going to object to that. And the judge is going to have to make a decision, yes or no, based on different reasons than the initial reason, which was the Court of Appeals got it wrong. He can't give that reason right now.
So non-legal mind like myself says, wow, this is great for the prosecution. There's one more charge that they can throw in there, but it's not that simple, is it? In fact, it could actually be problematic.
Absolutely, it very much could. So a lot of sort of what folks in the field are talking about is because this legal issue of third-degree murder hasn't yet been figured out, right? The Court of Appeals made a decision, and it's sort of like a three-layer cake, right? So the first layer is the trial court. The second layer is the Court of Appeals. The third and top layer is the Supreme Court, right? So where the current decision has been made is at that middle level. That's at the Court of Appeals. Mm-hmm. If you don't like what the Court of Appeals has to say, you can go up one level higher to make your pitch, right? So what's going to end up happening at some point is the Minnesota Supreme Court is going to hear this issue stemming from the Muhammad Noor appeal, right? They're going to figure out and give guidance to the lower courts, and they're going to say, hey, here's when third-degree murder is applicable, and here's when it's not, right? They're going to clarify that. But that hasn't happened yet. So let's say, for example, for Derek Chauvin's case, they do reinstate third-degree murder. There is a universe where the jury could hear the evidence, go through the case, and find him not guilty of second-degree murder, but guilty of third-degree murder. However, the Supreme Court could then come out with a decision to say, because his action was directed at one person, third-degree murder is not okay. And then Derek Chauvin's conviction of third-degree murder could be kicked, meaning he wouldn't be convicted of second-degree. His conviction for third-degree was overturned, and you can't retry him. You can't have another trial due to double jeopardy. So that could present potential major problems depending on what a jury would do with that.
So then real quick, why would the prosecution use third-degree murder?
That is a good question. It's just, typically in prosecutions, especially when you push them to trial, prosecutors will oftentimes add on the maximum number of charges they think could possibly stick, right? They could say, hey, maybe we are not as confident in second-degree murder, but we think there's definitely evidence where even if they acquit on second, we'll get them on third degree, right? So it's sort of shoring up their bets, hedging their bets to say, we're going to present as many as we can, and we're going to hope the jury picks at least one of those, right? Okay. So from their perspective, they're just saying, hey, this is one more way that we could try to get them. In terms of punishments and sentencings, presumably, as it stands right now, a conviction for second-degree unintentional murder and third-degree murder here would carry the same presumptive sentences, right? So in terms of punishment, whether they get him on second degree or they get him on third degree, from a punishment standpoint, they're going to be the same. But there is sort of that, curveball, that knuckleball of we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do
right.
with third-degree murder, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Man, all right. So Nick, we'll check in. Thank you very much for your time. We'll check in when either once a week or when something big happens. But it sounds like we're going to be looking at the news and hearing a lot of jury selection is still in progress. But you think 3 weeks?
3 weeks, and I'll add this because we just never know, and I think we'll have more answers by 9 a.m. tomorrow. The defense may make a continuance request to say, hey, judge, if there's going to be a third-degree charge, and when I say continuance, I mean a new date, a delayed date. They could say we need a new date. We have to figure this out. We're not prepared for third degree. There's a world where the judge could grant that, which means the trial could be pushed out even further.
If you're the defense attorney, would you ask for the continuance?
I'm sure they would. I think they're going to want time to just make sure that they've gone through every possibility. Prepping for trial, you're going to make sure you're as prepared as possible for every charge, that you're facing. Realistically, because third-degree murder was already at one point in time added, there's a universe where they knew this could be there. So, from an outside perspective, I don't necessarily know. I don't think there's an expert who's going to come in and save them only on that specific issue that they haven't already contemplated. But that said, the gravity of it is massive, and I could see them wanting to say, hey, we just need more time to prepare for this.
And I know there's probably no specific answer, but if there is, when would the trial actually start then? When would we see opening arguments?
Good question, and I just don't know at this point. Okay. Assuming we go forward as is, it's going to be March 29th. If there is a continuance, that's a really good question. We'll just have to kind of wait and see what they say.
All right, Nick, thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch up in a little bit when we get some more information.
Sounds great, James. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Nick.